The hospitality here is fantastic. So I'm very happy. If you want me back in 2026, I'll be very happy to do that as well. Okay. So it was actually a real privilege for me to hear George speak. And he went back to 1840. I'm only going to go back to November of last year. But AI time, a lot happens in 12 months. So what we want to do is talk about just some areas of major developments in AI and areas that which impact you in your industry in particular. Some areas we can't cover just because of the time that we're working on. Okay, so very, very briefly, the only reason why I'm mentioning myself is just to give you a little bit of context. I've never actually worked in your industry, but I've worked a lot with your industry. I used to run networks, but not your type of networks, much more modest networks. And again, George and I were going back to the days of ATM and X25 last night. But I spent a lot of time working with network providers, internet service providers, and also NAPs, as we called them, network equipment providers, particularly Huawei, ZTE, what was Alcatel-Lucent, now part of Nokia, and Ericsson. So I have some knowledge, but I don't have your deep knowledge of the carrier industry. So let's see. Let's just start by looking at the last 12 months. And there's two ways we could have done this. We could go November, December, January, February, etc. But I think it'd be much more interesting to move up the stack, starting at the bottom of AI. And we're not going to talk about GPUs. GPUs got faster. They got hotter. They consumed more electricity. And another area we could have talked about is actually the serving of models. So I will touch on that briefly. There's been a lot of open source innovation around serving the models, just like Java. Files need a JVM, models need LLM runtimes, and VLLM and Llama CPP have continued to innovate. And also my own company, Red Hat, is very heavily involved with something called LLMD. And from your perspective, this is interesting because it enables you to bring models in-house, to run them very, very effectively, and even potentially offer them as a service. And we do talk with a lot of people now about what we call MaaS, or model as a service. But what I really want to talk about is what actually start with what happened in the world of models. They got bigger. GPT-5.0 is in the trillions of parameters. But interestingly, they also got smaller. There's a lot of high quality models out there now in the 3 billion parameter range, the 7 or 8 billion parameter range, and they got better. And that's very, very interesting because you can imagine in a network situation when you start having 3 billion parameter models or 8 billion parameter models, you can start pushing them out towards the edge. You can start embedding them. You cannot embed a GPT style model or an Anthropic Sonnet. They're just too big. And why did they get better? We understood training better. We understood data better, how to feed the models. And also another area, we could talk about this for hours, is we understood how to quantize them better, which is to shrink the floating point 32s, which go down to floating point 16, down into very, very small integers. And we're getting much better at that. So a lot of research. We have better reasoning, and we have better tool calling. How many of you used to be network engineers? Come on, I'm sure there's more. Okay, so once upon a time, your job was reasoning and tool calling. You couldn't reach an endpoint. You couldn't resolve a host. You picked up your tools, whether it's ping, traceroute, NCAT, or your carriers probably have much more sophisticated tools. Models are getting much, much better at that, making those decisions and actually using tools. We're getting more and better open source models as well. which means that you can take a model off the shelf and fine-tune it and align it to your needs. In your industry, lots of models. Huawei, Ericsson, and others are developing specific models towards different problems like anomaly detection, predictive maintenance, churn, etc. So a lot of innovation there on the model side, but there's something missing from this slide. So we got GPT, we got Anthropic, we got Gemini, but what we don't have is China. China is an immense force in AI. And in the last 12 months, it caused a lot of disruption by releasing high quality models and high quality agents over and over again. Do people familiar with the term the DeepSeek moment? When DeepSeek got released, it temporarily reduced NVIDIA's valuation quite significantly. But what's more important, and I had hoped to show this, what's more important is these models are open source. They're not small. DeepSeek's probably about 650 billion parameters, but that is actually something that you can run. But also, DeepSeek is a thinking model. So I actually ran George through DeepSeek while he was talking, and it collated some notes. And then after it collated some notes, then it did its generative description. And it was very complimentary. I'll show you later, George. Then we saw Alibaba's Gwen 3. Again, these are open source models, and they're having an impact. They, I think, was a huge reason as to why OpenAI released 2 open source models. They put the pressure on OpenAI, which is the poster child of American AI companies. And recently we saw the 2 open source models come. I won't go through Moonshot and Beidou, but the key point is China is a major, major force. They're just doing their 5-year plan, or they've just completed it. But their goal by 2030 is to be the dominant provider in AI. And they have steps along the way. I think this year it is to have the majority of the top 10 most cited papers in AI, and they are moving and they are innovating. Huawei is there. Huawei is doing specific models. ZTE is there as well. So China is a major, major force in AI. Another big change was we talked about prompt engineering a lot last year. Prompt engineering. And prompt engineering is really you're giving the large language models their job description, what they need to do, how to behave. And there's a big, big focus now on context engineering. It's funny because we talk about the payload you give to an LLM has always been called the context window, not the prompt window. And this is really, really relevant for any of you who are developing applications for AI, because what this really means is if you create, let's just say, a network engineer system prompt, what's really, really important is the context that you give it. And those of you, are any of you vibe coders, agentic AI coders? Not in your spare time? Lots of people have come out of retirement, people who are like vice presidents and senior vice presidents who haven't coded for 15 or 20 years. They're all getting back into it. But context engineering is an absolutely key skill for people to have. And you need to provide large language models, not only with a good job description as to what you want them to do, but you need to feed them very well constructed context. So that's a key part of getting good results. I mean, without being disrespectful, some of you are definitely old enough to have heard garbage in, garbage out for a long, long time. So context engineering is about removing the garbage. And if we look here, there you see this is a typical bit of prompt engineering. And if you've ever written an AI application, with ChatGPT, you're just passing the entire conversation backwards and forwards. You remember ChatGPT 2022, 2023. It's quite simplistic, really. But now what we're doing is we are really constructing very, very sophisticated contexts. So imagine you have an issue where you have a routing problem, a jitter problem, a slice is misbehaving. Your tools will put together very, very good context, perhaps provide routing tables, provide error messages, provide supporting documentation into the context and pass it to the LLM. And the LLM will have much better data to work from. So it's a very, very key component going forward. So expect to see a lot more focus on context engineering, and it is going to be a key skill. Agents. So I think I spoke about this last time. We were talking a lot a year ago about fine-tuning, synthetic data generation, but also how 2025 was going to be the year of the agent. And it has turned out that way. And if you're not familiar with an agent, just a quick recap. One of the key characteristics of an agent is they have planning, they have reasoning. So a year ago, we were talking about chain of thought and what we call react, reason acting. They have tools. And that goes back to when you were a network engineer. That's what you were. You reasoned, why can't I reach the host? Is DNS working? Is there a route to that subnet, etc.? And you use tools. And agents are really a personification of this. And they're getting better and better and better. They get better by the month. Okay, so the models became stronger and the agents themselves became stronger. And this afternoon, I'll be outside. And if you want to create a network agent or some other agent, come out and we'll actually make one. It doesn't take long. We'll make an agent. You'll be able to see the plumbing of an agent. You'll be able to play with it. We'll use an agentic AI like Claude Code, and we'll make. I made a layer 3 BGP and OSPF agent over breakfast this morning. I was just testing it out.
So you'll be.
And then we also saw big vendors like Anthropic and OpenAI follow Perplexity's lead. Anyone use Perplexity? Okay, so Perplexity was the first of the big agentic AIs, and it did a lot of citation. It gave you sources, and because it gave you citation and sources, it gave you increased confidence in the results, rather than ChatGPT just coming out with a fact or asserting something, but providing no supporting evidence. The Chinese, they released Manus. Do people remember that? Again, it caused quite a stir, a very, very high quality agent. In the framework space, LangChain and LangGraph. So LangChain, the American company LangChain, is a very, very strong player in AI engineering frameworks. So if you think the AI world, you can divide into the ML ops people, machine learning operations people, and the data scientists who are down there training models, fine-tuning models, running models. And then we have the AI engineers who are consuming models, but they're writing the agents and the chatbots, etc. And a lot of the networking agents will be written by AI engineers, while the Huawei's machine learning models will be written by data scientists or trained. So we saw a lot of that, but we also saw the emergence of what we call deep agents. So the idea of a deep agent is it can become much, much more sophisticated. And does anyone use a Claude Code, Codex, Copilot? Okay. So they have increasingly got the characteristics of deep agents. If you use Claude Code to troubleshoot, say, an application or write an application, maybe you want to write an API, it will use teams of sub-agents, and you can define those agents. You can have an API agent, you can have a UI agent, you can have a UX agent, you can have a database agent. And they will use those teams of agents together. So whether they want to use Postgres or Oracle, when they need to do that configuration, they will call those agents to do that. So it's becoming very, very powerful. And if we were working as a team, I wouldn't be writing your layer 2 or layer 3 agents because I don't have the subject matter expertise. So I might be working in the actual agentic space, but somebody like yourself may help define a BGP agent or an OSPF agent and give the orchestration agent that capability, or give it a richer networking capability. So it's very, very powerful, and there's a lot of this going on right now. People are building teams of sub-agents. Anthropic are claiming that their models can now code for 30 hours at a time. And I do have colleagues who code through the night when they're sleeping. They literally set off their jobs, and then teams of agents go to work, documentation agents, research agents, and they work together, passing around. So definitely a big thing coming is the deep agents. MCP came. So what do agents need? They need tools. And just after this conference last year, just a few weeks after, Anthropic announced something called MCP, Model Context Protocol. It's well named. It's about providing context to the model. And that's all agents are doing. And what it gave us is, apart from a security nightmare, it gave us a security nightmare. And people are still getting their heads around that. We've seen a number of companies have major disasters with MCP, but it gave us tools. So in other words, because I work for Red Hat, I work with Kubernetes. We're the leading commercial vendor of Kubernetes in the form of OpenShift. So with an MCP server for Kubernetes, I can talk in natural language to my Kubernetes clusters. And Kubernetes clusters are really complex. They're becoming more and more complex. And with an MCP server, I can ask it the state of pods. I can ask it if I have a route to a service. And I can work with it in in English. So MCP is very, very significant. I think in your industry, the network equipment providers are probably going a little bit slower than some other areas. That's because you value things like security, reliability, uptime. Some of us are a bit more casual about that, depending where we are. So I think you're going to see a lot more development around MCP. And what we are seeing is vendors, ISVs, are making MCP available for their products. So MiniIO, the S3 storage, a friend of mine wrote their MCP server. We're writing MCP servers for all our products. Ansible automation controllers, Kubernetes. Oracle is writing MCP servers. You can get an MCP server for Slack, and you can get one from Jira. And anything which stops me looking at Jira is a good thing, in my opinion. I'd be very happy if I could just chat with Jira without having to fill in those tickets. But yes, one of the biggest areas for MCP, one of the earliest adopters, are these people, the vibe coders. Because if you're doing agentic coding, and this is something that I actually do, if you're doing agentic coding, you need tools. You need tools. If you're writing OpenAI's API, it's constantly changing. The completions API has been replaced by our responses API. The way they do structure, what we call structured outputs, changes. So when we write code, we have MCP servers and tools go and look up the documentation in real time. If I'm not a front-end person, I cannot do web design to save my life. It's just not a talent I have. But if I have an issue and I want to fix some CSS, I no longer have to talk to my front-end engineers. I talk to an MCP server. I talk to one called Playwright, and it takes over my browser. And it starts rendering things and it resizes it. I actually see it resizing in real time into different configurations and viewports, like a mobile device, a wide screen. And the MCP server takes all that feedback and then it fixes my CSS. So vibe coding, I'm not going to read through that, but in February, Karpathy, who's ex-OpenAI, ex-Tesla, extremely smart, well worth checking his videos, by the way, because like Andrew Ning, he's a teacher. He's a natural teacher. He communicates ideas. Like if you want to know what an LLM is in depth, he has a great session on that. But he talked about how he vibes and vibe coding and how he chats. He actually does chat. He uses his voice. He says, do this, do that, etc., etc. And I was actually at the big AI engineering conference in New York just after this, and we were all vibe coding, and we were all laughing, and we were having a lot of fun. But I'm not sure whether you're going to really want to put all that stuff into production. You know, if you see some of the code casual vibing produces, it's quite frightening. And if you actually do a vibe session and you ask it, say, hey, could you change this variable name to that? And then you see 700 lines of code get changed, you soon realize that vibe doesn't really scale to the enterprise. And we've seen another big trend emerge, especially over the last couple of months. And although this book by Gene Kim, who is the DevOps guy, he's one of the big DevOps guys. He wrote the Phoenix Project, the Unicorn Project, if any of you are familiar. He wrote the DevOps Handbook. So he's someone who's quite conservative. And although he's just released this book called Vibe Coding, it's really about a different form of coding, and that is spec coding. And this does have legs in the enterprise and in the network, because spec coding is really a formalized version of vibe coding. So you don't just sit there chatting and say, hey, I'd like a React application for a to-do list. You actually specify your application. And I'm sure there's many different roles in the room. So the product managers amongst you, or the business owners, you could express what you want from your application from a business perspective. What is its role? What does it do? Not how is it written? And your architects could specify the stack. What stack to use? What conventions to use? Whether to use pedantic v2, how to what your endpoints are, and you formalize the specification across a series of documents. And if you ever want to try this, if you want to go home and try this, and you probably have better things to do, but if you do want to try this, maybe try with Kiro, AWS's Kiro. It's an easy download. It's a spec-first Visual Studio Code lookalike because it's a fork of Visual Studio Code or Code Server, the upstream project. I use something called SpecKit. SpecKit has probably got a slightly steeper learning curve. It's already got 41,000 stars on GitHub. It's only been out since the beginning of September. It's got 79 releases so far, and it supports, I think, 14 agentic tools. In other words, Cursor, Codex, Claude Code, Rue, Kilo, etc., a lot of the tools. So this is very, very much evolving, and it would not surprise me within your industry whether people will start looking at the patterns for people in my space who maybe write agents or MCP servers and adopting it for networking, with it. Because at the end of the day, all this is just markdown. It's all just text. You can go inside of SpecKit and you can read everything. If you create a spec, the agents, they're very, very readable, very, very accessible. So this is definitely a very, very hot area at the moment. In fact, I'm going to AI native developer in New York at the end of the month. And then that's going to be followed in the same week with AI engineering, the Code Summit. And at both events, the fundamental topic is spec coding. So spec coding makes vibe coding ready for the enterprise. And it is impacting how people are hiring and how people are developing. It's still very much emerging. So I do recommend looking at that and seeing how it can apply. And one of the things I will say, when the agentic AI tools became good enough, probably in the middle of this year, we started churning out proof of concepts, not ready for production, but we started churning out proof of concepts in hours of things that we'd had on the backlog. We wanted a tool to do summarization of this, or a tool to do something like that. And we would talk to each other and say, wouldn't it be great if we had a tool which did X? And when these tools reached maturity, as I say, right at the midpoint of this year, we would knock these things up literally in hours. Not in a state that we could take them to production, but in a state that we could test them. I wrote a log analyzer, which took an Ansible automation log and analyzed it and root caused the problem. And in a couple of hours, we saw Claude Sonnet is really, really good at this. It's looking at our code, it's telling our code where the faults are, and it was highlighting all these other areas, such as security. And when we combine this with spec, we can vibe code a proof of concept, evaluate it, and then we can then spec code something which has more governance and is ready for production. So what's coming next? It's hard to know. A lot's happened in AI. I think you're definitely going to see a lot more autonomous AI. You're going to see a lot more rollout of agentic systems taking more and more control of infrastructure. I don't know whether we're going to see agentic network engineers. I am sure people are working on this. It's a very, very obvious area. It's actually, in some ways, it's got some characteristics which make it particularly suited to automating with AI. I think we're going to see some much more powerful open source models. They're getting really, really good. Right now, if you came to me outside and said, hey, I'm going to start vibe coding or spec coding, what model should I use? I would say go and use Anthropic's Sonnet 4.5. It's sort of the de facto model, but the open source models are getting close. They're getting really close. We're definitely going to see a lot more spec coding. I think a lot of CTOs and chief governance officers and the CEO are nervous about vibe coding to production. Imagine you're a bank, or you're a carrier, or you're a telco. You're probably not in a hurry to trust your entire infrastructure to AI yet, but it's going to come. And I think we will have to start getting serious about AI security, because right now, security has been wildly neglected. And there's been some quite exciting issues. So the company who said that AI wiped out 3 months of their data doesn't have an AI problem. They have a governance problem. Okay, so I'm going to be outside this afternoon. I'm going to take this laptop. I have a bunch of coding tools on it. And if you feel like it, come outside and we'll make a layer 3 engineer. We can make a layer 2 engineer. We can make some other sort of engineer, and we can spin up some agents, and I can show you some of the technology working.
Thank you.
Cheers.